Okay, boys and girls, let's think about the number 155. And I just want you to write that on your place value chart. And then I'm going to go ahead and write unit form, and I want you to tell me what to write. 100, 5 tens, and 5 ones. So let's say I want to round this number to the nearest 100. What number would I look at? That's correct, I'd look at the ones because there's a 1 in the hundreds place. So, and then I would take that and I would put it on my vertical number line and do some rounding with it. Now what if I wanted to round to the nearest 10? I'm going to erase my hundreds, but what about that 1? I'm just going to move it over. So now I have 15 tens and 5 ones. And if I'm rounding to the nearest 10, then I would start with the number 15 tens and put that on the bottom of my vertical number line. And what if my teacher said, let's round to the nearest 1? That means I move all my digits over to the ones place. So basically, this little chart we have right here is just a way to help us decide what number is going to go on the bottom of the number line when I start rounding, so that I know what will be on the top and I can find the midpoint and all of that. So let's take a look at the first one. It says round to the nearest 10 and 100. So I want to start with 100. What digit is in the hundreds place? A 1. So we will write it in unit form. 100 equals 100. So unit form and standard form. And what number comes after 1? 2. So then we have 2 hundreds, which equals 200 in standard form. Halfway between 100 and 200, 150. So I'm rounding the number 155. Does that fall above or below the midpoint of 150? That's correct. 155 goes here. So rounded to the nearest 100, 155 would be 200. Let's take a look at what would happen if I round to the nearest 10. So the nearest 10, I'm going to, hold on a minute. I think I'll erase with my eraser instead, because I covered up one of those number lines. So let's round 155 to the nearest 10. So that would be 15 tens on the bottom of my number line. 15 tens. Now this is just a strategy. 15 tens in standard form is what, boys and girls? 150. Anything times 10 add a 0 to the end. And what comes after 15? 16. So in standard form, 160. The midpoint, halfway between 150 and 160 is, and that just happens to be the number we're rounding. So if it's the midpoint, 5 and above, round up. The answer to 155 rounded to the nearest 10 is 160. Okay, let's try it with decimals. So moving on, let's take 1 and 57 hundredths and put it on the place value chart. And I got that right up here. Now this says decompose, but if you remember correctly, we're just erasing a place value and moving it over each time. And then erase a place value and move it over again. so that we have what looks like an upside down staircase. See? Anyway, it's just a strategy so I can figure out what number to start with on the bottom of my number line. So round to the nearest whole. Whole means whole number. So what number is my whole number? That's pretty simple. You're going to write 1, 1 equals 1. And what comes after 1? Good. 2 1s equals 2. What's halfway between 1 and 2, boys and girls? 1 1/2 or 1 5/10. The number I'm rounding just happens to go to the hundredths place. So I need to fill in with a 0 on my midpoint so that I am comparing hundredths to hundredths. So 150, or 1 57 hundredths, 1 50 hundredths. 57 is above 50. So rounded to the nearest whole, the answer would be 2. All right, let's take a look at, whoops, don't think I want to take it all off. Let's take a look at rounding to the nearest tenth, because that's what my next direction says. Round to the nearest whole and the nearest tenth. So what numbers in the tenths place would help me? Good, the 15. Now, 15 tenths in unit form, and then 15 tenths in standard form, 1 5/10. What number comes after 15? Good, 16 tenths equals 1 6/10. Okay, halfway between 1 5/10 and 1 6/10. Do you remember the strategy? Just put a 5 on the end of the bottom number. If it were on the sprint from yesterday, it would look like this, and you would have to find a midpoint right here. And we talked about this. There's a strategy. We just put a 5 on the end of the first number. So 1 55 hundredths. The number I'm rounding is 1 57 hundredths. 57 is above 55. So this would round to the nearest tenth, that would be 1 6/10. Okay, let's take a look at another one. This one's pretty good. Round 4 381 thousandths to the nearest 10, 1, 10th, and 100th. So let's take a look at it. First of all, let's put it on the place value chart. And go ahead and write your decimals here. It's really going to help you. So if I slide each digit, or if I take away a place value, and then take away the tenths place, and then finally take away everything but the thousandths, that's what my chart should look like. Now let's label the number lines. It says to round to the nearest 10. So just put a 10 up there. The nearest 1, the nearest tenth, and the nearest hundredth. Okay, so starting with the nearest 10, I don't see anything in my tens place. So what number stands for nothing? 0 tens equals 0. And what comes after 0? 1. 10 equals 10. And halfway between 0 and 10 is the number 5, and it's a whole number. Now, can we look at a whole number in the number we're rounding? What is the whole number? 4 is the whole number. Does 4 fall above or below the midpoint? Very good. You have to write the whole number out, though. 4 381 thousandths, rounded to the nearest 10. The answer is 0. Okay, let's take a look at the nearest one. What number's in the ones place? So we'll write 4 ones equals 4. What comes after 4? 5 ones equals 5. Halfway between 4 and 5, 4.5. Very good. I'm rounding a number that goes all the way to the thousands place. So my midpoint, I have to carry out all the way to the thousands place. So 4 and 500 thousandths, and I'm rounding 4 and 381 thousandths. Above or below the midpoint? Good. 4 and 381 thousandths is below. So, rounded to the nearest 1, the answer is 4. Let's take a look at the tenths place. What do I have in the tenths place? 43 tenths. So, unit form, 43 tenths equals 4 and 3 tenths. What comes after 43? 44 tenths equals 4 and 4 tenths. Halfway between, what's the strategy? Put a 5 on the end of the bottom number. So 4 and 35 hundredths is the midpoint. I'm rounding a number that goes all the way to the thousands. So I have to put one more digit on my midpoint. 4 and 350 thousandths. 4 and 381 thousandths. 81 is above the midpoint. So rounded to the nearest tenth, the answer is 4 and 4 tenths. All right, and the last one we're going to do is the hundredths place. So the hundredths place is 438 hundredths. That's unit form. 438 hundredths. And yes, you can use your abbreviation for hundredths. Equals 4 and 38 hundredths. What comes after 438? 439 hundredths equals 4 and 39 hundredths. The midpoint, just put a 5 on the end of the bottom number, 4.385. 4 and 385 thousandths. I'm rounding 4 and 381 thousandths, which is below the midpoint. So rounded to the nearest hundredth, it's 4 and 38 hundredths.